Alright, hello everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Zoo Tycoon Complete Collection. Uh, this is going to be the beginning of a tips and tricks series I'm going to be going ahead and doing. This was voted for on my Discord server. If you want to participate in polls similar to this, you can go ahead and click the link down in the description below for that. This is a response to something I've been seeing lately over on another Discord server, though. The Discord server for Marcel Voss. He's a decent-sized YouTuber that's done a lot of videos on Roller Coaster Tycoon, and he's been recently diving into Zoo Tycoon. As a result, his community has been getting more interested in this game and playing it a lot more. And while initially I was going to go ahead and have my first video in this series be on restaurants versus food stalls, that is quickly turning into a much bigger monstrosity than I was originally planning. It's actually probably going to end up being a multi-video, sort of almost mini-series, if you will. So I decided to go with a smaller project for my first video, and that is a common problem I'm seeing over on his server, and that is that people have been not building shows. They've been having issues with the shows completely destroying their zoos as far as rating and profitability and everything. And a lot of people just stop making them altogether, which is, I mean, it's definitely a response, but it's definitely not optimal, because you can actually build shows and have it work in a zoo, obviously. So I want to go ahead and actually break down how shows actually work and how to make them work in a zoo. So, I'm going to go ahead and click Continue Save Game. This is just a blank map that I'm going to be using for the sake of the series. It's just a simple blank map. This is one I downloaded off of ZooTech Phoenix. There are mods in my game. If I go ahead and go into Zoo Tycoon here, as you can see, like the novelty food dispenser or the this restroom here, which has a brick pattern to it. I do have mods in this game. I'm going to be sticking to vanilla buildings and vanilla animals for the sake of this tutorial. The only mod that's actually affecting anything for the sake of this tutorial is that I do have what's called the Zoo Test Hack, which again I got off of ZooTech Phoenix. What it does is, as soon as you have an animal in the zoo, it will spawn guests at your zoo gate here at the maximum rate possible until you reach the guest cap. It won't really actually affect anything as far as the basis for the tips and tricks I'm showing, so it doesn't really actually bother anything. In fact, it will actually make it easier to display stuff later when I'm talking about things in the context of the zoo. So it'll be useful for that. So I'm not going to go ahead and actually take that out. I'm just going to go ahead and play with it as is. Should be fine. All these rules, as I said, will still apply when you're building your zoos in vanilla, if you're playing vanilla. So first thing first, I'm going to go ahead and actually expand my path network here, just so we have something to actually kind of work with. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to do something maybe kind of like this, and then maybe like this. So, actually, you know what? We'll take one off the end. You'll see why here in just a minute. So we have ourselves our basic path network, and what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm just going to go ahead and start with the real basic concepts of how to actually build and construct a show, and then we'll kind of build out from there until we get to a full zoo context. So, first thing we need to do is we need to actually build tanks. So you can do that by going to fences here and looking under the Marine Mania filter. You can also go ahead and select all, obviously, but it's just easier with Marine Mania. It just gives you the Marine Mania stuff. As I said, I'm going to stay away from mods, even though it doesn't really matter. I mean, I could do brick stuff here and it would still work just as fine in vanilla, but we'll stick with completely vanilla stuff just for sake of argument. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and build this glass tank wall here so we guests can actually see into the tank. And then we'll do a solid one here just for sake of aesthetics. Doesn't really matter. And this gives us a tank. As you can see, it already forms, fully full of water. Everything's good to go. I'm going to go ahead and build the gate here on this far end. And a tank filter over here. You want tank filters with your tanks. Technically, the marine specialists can go ahead and actually manually clean tanks, but it takes them ages to do so. So it's much more efficient to do it with a tank filter, I should say. And then what we want to do is build a show tank. So this is actually, there are two different tanks. You're going to build a show tank for where the animals actually perform their shows. And then the exhibit tank is where they stay and eat and keep guests happy and stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and start constructing a show tank. I'm going to turn on the grid. Control G turns on the grid. It makes it a little easier to build things. So we're going to build out to there and there. And then I like to use this angled railing. You can use any of the tank walls that can be seen through. But you just need it to be something see-through for guests to be able to see into the show. Show tank 2. Now, as you can see, a portal here has been built between the two tanks. As long as the walls of the two tanks are at the same level, a portal will be built, and this will allow the animals to pass between the exhibit and the show. I'm going to go ahead and also build a tank filter. This is why I believe that piece of path there is completely unnecessary. And then we're also going to go ahead and place, if I turn my view, place this on the far end. Now, the reason why I did this is for a couple reasons. For one, if I click on this, you can see right here's our show tank window. This will allow us to go ahead and add tricks to our shows, change price, change what species are able to be seen in it, as well as the frequency of our shows. You will probably want to go ahead and set your show frequency to infrequent. Having it any higher than that, and your animals will actually not be in their exhibits enough to really be able to properly feed and provide guests happiness and stuff like that. So you want to go ahead and set it to infrequent. That's just standard procedure. It's just it creates nightmares if you don't do it that way. So be sure to set that to infrequent. But I also went ahead and set the sort of, normally these are gates on normal exhibits. These are more like docks here, but these tank gates as far apart from each other as possible. And the reason why is because I'm in this scenario here where I've got only one show tank and one normal exhibit. I want the marine specialist I'm going to have to take as long as possible going between these two exhibits as possible to, again, provide time between shows, kind of helping aid that fact that the shows are supposed to be infrequent. And what this does is it allows more time for the animals to exist in their habitat and gain their happiness back, gain food, all that. It'll also provide more time for the guests to kind of scatter throughout the park more. So that way they're going ahead and providing economic activity to your amenities that are further out from the shows and stuff like that, which is one of the common problems people have been running into, is that a lot of their other shops and stalls start running into debt. A lot of guests are hungry and thirsty, and that's because they're all concentrated around the shows where there's just not, you just don't have enough space often for enough amenities to keep all those guests catered all the time. So you want them to kind of spread out to the other areas where you have other amenities. And so this provides the time for that to happen, while still allowing us to have a gigantic show that will earn massive profit. So next thing, of course, we need our grandstands. For the sake of this, I'm going to do the fancy grandstands. Why not? So we're going to go and build them all along here. You do only want one path wide tile between the grandstands and the show tank. Any further, and the guests won't be able to see into the show tank. So that's why I only built this path one tile wide. So we have ourselves a nice big set of grandstands there. Now, the longer a show lasts, the more guests will accrue hunger, thirst, and bathroom needs. And so as those decrease, your guest happiness will start decreasing as well. That's a compounding effect, where the further those go down, the faster guest happiness decays. It will actually at a certain point decay faster than what the show's buff here. This actually shows how much happiness guests earn from given tricks. Eventually it will actually outpace the tricks in the show. And so you don't want your shows to last too long, otherwise guests get unhappy, so you'll start getting problems with thirst and hunger again. And so you want to go ahead and make sure your shows are relatively brief. You don't want them staying in the grandstands too long. This also means that by having the shows be brief, you're able to actually have more shows within a single span of time, which means more guests are actually filtering into the grandstands in a given, say, month, for instance. You're able to do multiple shows in a month instead of just one or two. And so you're actually able to earn more money. So it's more efficient all around to go ahead and have shorter shows if possible. The buffing to guest happiness just kind of plateaus after a bit, and then eventually starts actually being a negative as guests get more and more hungry. In line with that, though, there are going to be some guests that will be hungry and thirsty and need a bathroom when they leave. And so you want to go ahead and provide some amenities when they leave the show very nearby. We'll go ahead and place this restaurant right here. A restaurant is really nice because it caters to all needs. It caters to food, thirst, restroom, and energy. The guests shouldn't have a problem with energy. They've been sitting in the grandstands the whole time, but the other three can be a massive problem. So restaurants cater to all three. They're really good for this. You can also do it with food courts as well. There are ways to go ahead and do that. I will cover that here in a little bit. For now, we'll just stick with the restaurant since we're keeping to a more basic model here starting out. Last but not least, we need our animals. I have tons of mods, animals. I'm going to stick with vanilla, and we're actually going to go ahead and do the animal that has the most tricks, which is the dolphin. That way, I can show you the worst case scenario shows how big a show can possibly be before you start running into problems with guests. All other animals, obviously, you're going to have more breathing room with since there's less tricks in general to work with. So we'll do dolphins. Now, As you can see, the dolphins have this star on their icon that tells you they're a show animal. You can also see that in the tooltip there. It says bottlenose dolphins perform in show tanks. This is also the case for any other animal with a star. So you have the orcas, the great white, the southern sea otter, and then in the Zoo Tycoon filter at the very bottom, the California sea lion. There is one sort of Easter egg animal that does shows as well, and that is the lion's mane jellyfish. They do actually do shows. This is more of an Easter egg. They basically just swim up and down. These shows are not very entertaining. It is not a meta strat. Don't do it legit. Do it as a gag. But it is funny to see it happen. Yeah, it's just kind of funny, the idea of jellyfish doing a show. Anywho, we're going to stick with the dolphins. So let's go ahead and click on the dolphins, and let's just see what the zookeeper is recommending. The tank is too shallow. So what you can do to go ahead and fix that, you can go ahead and do this two ways. You can either hold onto the edge of the tank and drag it up or down, change the tank height. That will go ahead and then fill up with water, and that creates a deeper tank. You can also go ahead and just click on the gate here, and then you can go ahead and do one of these tank adjustment options. Adjusting the wall brings it up and down, and then you can also adjust the base, which brings the entire exhibit up and down. So if you want the exhibit to be flush with the ground, for instance, you can do that, and then adjust the tank wall up twice. You can see guests are already spawning in. Tank is still too shallow, so we can adjust the wall up a little more. Adjust up 2 more ticks. Tank is no longer too shallow. And so then what we can do here is we can go ahead and do the same thing. So the base gets flush with the ground. And surprisingly, it's actually already lined up with the gate. Interesting. So, we need more foliage and more rocks. Their favorite foliage is the kelp. So we'll go ahead and just place some kelp beds. Well, you can just press play. That way we can see the smiley faces. We'll just put it all in one spot. We're not looking for fancy exhibit design here. And then we can do the ocean floor rocks, doing the same thing. Get rid of 2 of those. All right. Probably by too many guests. That's because of how many guests have been spawning in. Suitably 99. Not too bad. So now we got a crap ton of guests in here. We'll actually probably need a couple restaurants just to keep this going. That should be it for the guests spawning, right? Yep. They're at maximum number. This is I set my maximum number to the same as the ini file because I did want some level of consistency with vanilla here. And then I will go ahead and do something a little like this. I'm just going to provide the guests some additional amenities. That way they're not getting completely angry in this span of time, because I do want to show some of how the functionality of all this. Trying to think about how best to go about this. I think, really, honestly, it's just going to get cut off. That doesn't really work, does it? There we go. This will give the guests some other places to go. And we can probably sneak a carousel back here as well. For the sake of this tutorial, we don't strictly need to do all this, but I'm just going to do it. Why not? So Marine Specialist is going to start the show here briefly. So what we want to do is we want to go in here. I'm going to take all these tricks off. We're going to go ahead and optimize this show a little bit. So first thing we need to do is we need to provide some props. We need to go ahead and go in here, and we need to go to Show Objects. There's nothing under the Zoo Tycoon filter. If we go into Marine Mania, though, we get all of them. There are 3 main props the dolphins play with. There's the Advanced Trick Area, which we're going to need. It's quite large. It's actually the largest prop in the game, so you don't really need the shows to be a whole lot bigger than the Advanced Trick Area. It'll do everything. We need the Dolphin Ball, and we also need the Dolphin Hoop. At this point, we can go and take all this off. In general, with dolphin shows, with the number of tricks there are, you generally don't want to provide more than 2 of every trick. Any more than that, you start running into the time problem, as I said, where guests' needs are decaying fast enough, and therefore the guests' happiness is decaying fast enough that the show isn't really providing much of a boost anymore, so you kind of got your maximum effect. I kind of have a bit of an aesthetic way of doing this a little bit, where I kind of start with the more basic tricks and then work my way up to the more advanced ones, and then work my way back down. So we're going to do something like wave to crowd, spin, jump, flip, tail walk. And then the advanced trick area is kind of next. So we'll do bubble jump, belly flop, and then there's play with ball, and then wherever the hoop's at, there it is. Then we kind of work our way back down. Play with ball, belly flop, bubble jump, tail walk, flip, jump, spin, wave to crowd. That'll give us about a 58-point boost to happiness, which is pretty dang good. Without being too long, this is right about the maximum of what you want to go ahead and do. Any more tricks than this, and you start running into problems. And so that's generally a good rule of thumb. If you do the same trick with, or if you do the same thing with every other animal, where you kind of do basically 2 of every trick, you'll never run into any issues with the guest's happiness. And of course, you can go ahead and throw in a few extra as well with the other ones, because again, there's less tricks with the other animals. So you can play around with this a little bit. Set this to infrequent, and with it providing 58 happiness, we could probably go ahead and get away with like $7. That'd probably be fine. Yeah, we'll just do it this way. Whatever. For some reason, it wasn't wanting to put in the decimal point. Now, of course, you can go ahead and like move tricks around in here, so we can do them in a different sequence. I just like doing this sequence; it makes things nice and consistent, like perfectly symmetrical. And of course, we have everything set to ball nose dolphin. It's the only one we have. So now, when the show is performed, it will perform that show. Now, shows will attract pretty much all guests in the zoos to them once they get started. So guests will flock to them. That's why I said you want to have a decent amount of time between shows, so that way guests kind of have time to spread back out again. And so setting them to infrequent, having the gates be far apart, that really helps. Something that also helps is if you have multiple shows in one zoo, having an actual dedicated marine specialist just for the shows, so they have to keep walking between the shows. It helps. And then you can go ahead and space your shows out across the zoo, pretty equidistant from one another. And that will go ahead and, again, provide some leeway between the shows. Generally speaking, if you have more than 2 or 3 shows in your zoo, you could probably get away with doing another marine specialist. You don't need them to be that infrequent. But this kind of helps make it a little more manageable. And that way, you're not running into massive issues across your whole zoo. And so you can see the guests are already flocking in like crazy. I'm not even sure what the capacity of all these grandstands are. Let's see, we have each grandstand, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And we have 15. The math on that is escaping me at the moment. 12 times 15 is 180. Okay. So we can house, out of our total guests, we can house 2/10 to 1/5 of all of our guests. Pretty close to. Which is a lot. And that's another thing you need to keep in mind, is that these shows are going to bring in a lot of guests. So having this many grandstands is probably a little too much, honestly, because again, it will fill up. And so, do you really want all those guests off your path system? I mean, think about it. Every time, if your zoo's kind of built around having that 1,000 guests on the paths, and then you start building a show somewhere, like right at the end, you're going to be pulling a lot of guests off the path system every time a show starts up. Not to mention all the ones that are flocking over here that won't have a seat. And so the other side of the zoo is going to be very, very empty. Because guests walk pretty slowly. Again, this is why it's important to provide time between the shows. We'll sit here and watch the show in action. Not that it really matters for the sake of this tutorial, but I kind of want to show the guests going over to the restaurants and stuff later. So right now they're doing their flips and their jumps. The more basic tricks, ones that don't require any props. Doing the tail walk. I gotta admit, the animation quality is actually pretty dang good for being a 2D isometric game from the year 2000. Or 2001, I should say. Now, if we click on our guests here, and click on their thoughts, you can see that they're saying this is a cool trick, and so that will be increasing their happiness when they go to leave. You can see their guest happiness is 72 for this guy. We'll go and keep an eye on toward the end of the show and see what the guest happiness jumps up to. But we can see the needs are declining. These three are declining. Bubble jump. And we just saw the thirst right there just jump down a little bit. So as those go down, the guest happiness will continue to decline as well as the multiplier adds up, basically. We're about to see the hoop jump, I think, maybe. Nope, the dolphin's swimming around the other way. Oh, they had to go to the other side. There we go. And the guests are applauding right now because they're really enjoying it, but you can see the hunger is now already in the yellow, so it's going to start really kind of wearing down the happiness. But the happiness is continuing to jump up as the tricks are happening, so right now the guest happiness is at 79. It was at 73 earlier, I believe. See more flips. We're currently seeing 85 happiness, so we've jumped up quite a few points. We're starting to see that the needs are wearing down, so it's going to start being a negative feedback loop here pretty soon. So the show is going to kind of wrap up here relatively soon, but we're already kind of past the point of all the props being used for the most part. We're already onto the tail walk, so it should be wrapping up pretty quickly here. And that's why I said it needs to kind of be that almost that really tight timing with this big of a show. We're now sitting at 90 happiness. Now, another reason why you want to kind of space the tricks out and why I really like doing the method of trick placement that I do in the queue is that two tricks of the same type butted right up against each other will have diminishing returns on that happiness meter. And so you do want to space them out. So the fact that we need to space them out and that we don't want the show to be too long, it kind of ends up being a thing where we're having it kind of mirrored like that, where you have only two of each trick and you kind of just mirror it like that. It just makes a really consistent method. See, happiness is already declining now. We're already kind of approaching the point of where it's declining faster than we're receiving. Not all guests are going to be this low on their stats yet, so I mean, on average, the guests are probably still doing okay, but we're now getting kind of the point. Energy is also declining. I thought energy didn't decline in grandstands. Apparently they do. Now, one thing I'm surprised by is that we're not actually full. We do have some empty spots over here. I guess guests just aren't making their way all the way down here before coming in. Some guests are turning around earlier. Maybe there's hunger and energy and all that's getting too low by the time they get over here or something. Not quite sure. We might still have too many grandstands. I mean, they're decently full. They're more than half full, so they're going to be paying for themselves. So profitability-wise, it's still worthwhile having them, but... See, they're already under the wave to crowd, and we're at 87 happiness. We dropped from 90 to 87. But not all guests are going to be down here in the yellow at the end of the show. Some might have come into the show at much higher. So right about here is kind of the point where the average guest happiness is going to start declining. And now the show's over. So it times up pretty well. Now they're all going to start streaming off of the grandstands here pretty soon. And thoughts? wow, that was a great show. So they have a really positive response still. The happiness have been starting to decline more and more. They're going to start liking the show less and less. So now we should start seeing them piling into the restaurant. I mean, a decent amount are probably going to start heading home anyway, just because there's not a lot in the zoo to see, so a lot of them probably think that they've seen everything in the zoo. But a decent amount should also go to the restaurant because they have low needs. This one's not thinking they need to go home, so they're probably going to... Oh, they turned. A decent amount have kept going, though. This one might just go home. Yeah, this one's going home. As you can see, a lot of them have kept going down here toward the restaurants. And our restaurants are making a lot of money. Part of that is also just the sheer number of guests in the zoo. It's a bit overinflated, to say the least. Yeah, like even this stuff's making a lot of money at this point. But the premise is still there. That restaurants placing your shows would make a lot of money. I'm willing to bet this one's going to make more than these other two, just because it's near the show. So we'll kind of give it a little bit of time to go ahead and see that. We'll wait until March ends, because then that's when the monthly values are calculated. And we'll go ahead and see what the average profits are. I'm pretty sure all three are going to be pretty close to full capacity, but I think this is going to be the one that's full more often than not, just because it's near the show. So right now, as you can see, the marine specialist is not checking on the tank at all, the show tank at all, trying to do a show. It's coming over here to check on the dolphins. And so it's taking time for them to walk over here, and that's providing time for the guests to spread out throughout the rest of the zoo again, and that way the rest of the zoo is not suffering in the meantime. Just because there's not shows constantly going on. Meanwhile, the fish are almost empty. This is providing time for the dolphins to be back in their exhibit and gain their happiness back again, because they will lose happiness in the shows over time, because the exhibits aren't exactly the most well suited for them. Not to mention they do get hungry after a long time. With enough time in a show, they'll actually come back in and not get happy again in time, and the game might actually take them away to do poor treatment. That can absolutely happen. Oh, coming back already. They must have checked them in that meantime. April 1st. All right, let's check. Average profit, we're looking at 2,682, 3922, and 3950. Strange. Normally, I would think the one closest to the show would have the most. That's kind of bizarre. Then again, this is not exactly normal situations that I have cooked up here, with there being guests all over the place. It could be a thing where the guests that come over here are getting more hungry, and so they pop in here first. I don't know. That might be weighting it a little bit. But in premise, the ones that are near shows are going to have way more overall foot traffic because more of the zoo's there. Again, the size of the zoo is also not helping. The zoo's incredibly small, so that could be skewing things as well. If I go ahead and go to a actual zoo, which is what we're going to go ahead and do now anyway, I'll go ahead and load. Not saving. I need to go to my excavation zoo here. This is where we have actual zoo in practice. I need to actually do one thing real quick. I need to go ahead and pick you up, place you down, pick you up, place you down. This is a very heavily modded zoo, and these exhibits don't actually have proper gates. And so the keeper's AI kind of acts weird. I have to pick them up and place them down in order for them to actually do their jobs, or else they just kind of get stuck in a AI loop. But in this zoo, I have a dolphin show over here and a sea lion show over here on opposite corners of the zoo. This encourages guests to travel around the zoo as they go between shows. I have one marine specialist working the shows, and so they're constantly going back and forth. It takes a good amount of time going in between them. As you can see, I have a food court for this and a restaurant for this. This restaurant is making 3,046 on average. This one's making 1,212. So you can see already that like this one's making a lot more than this one. Even though the entry area is probably the second most trafficked area in the entire zoo, given it's right there where all the guests come in and leave. But this one's making a lot more because it's picking up all the show guests. In addition, I have some additional snack stands here, which are all making a modest profit. The Polly's popcorn stand, yeah, that one's the one that's making a decent profit compared to the others. Popcorn, for some reason, does real well. And then these food stands over here are making a killing as well, on average. Except for the ice cream stand, strangely. It's kind of weird. Guests actually do have a slight dessert need, so I think that one would do pretty well. But maybe there's just enough other food stands here that's kind of cutting into that for the ones that would normally get ice cream just for eating food. Maybe that's what it is. But overall, they're still making a killing. 1,600, 3,500, 1,300, 1,700, 1,300. So pretty good. And again, a lot of this is coming from shows, because as the guests pour out, they look for food and restrooms and stuff like that. Stalls are actually not that bad for this, just because they do have a lower upkeep than restaurants. So this is one of the times where stalls are actually not that bad. Because when you calculate all their profit together, it's more than the lobby's restaurant. So one of those things where food stalls are actually not that bad. And these are the fancy ones. These ones have a higher upkeep anyway. Let's see, 150 a month. I think the regular ones only have like something around 50 or so, or 100. I mean, this one's only 40 a month. I mean, the other food stands are a lot lower than these fancy ones. I just picked the fancy ones because they look fancy. Just looks a little different from what I normally do. But because of the fact that the shows are on opposite sides of the zoo, the marine specialist that's working them is having to spend more time walking in between them. This is providing more time for the guests to kind of spread out throughout the zoo. And so you can see throughout this zoo, I mean, the guests are spread out pretty evenly overall, all things considered. They're spread out pretty evenly. Now there is a few extra guests. I did have my mod turned off briefly in this zoo, so it went down from 1,300, which was my maximum before, down to 1,200. But that extra 200 is really not making a huge difference here. I mean, as you can see, it's a pretty even distribution. It would just be a little bit less. And you can see among 1,200 guests, to only have 70 thirsty and 39 hungry is really not bad at all. Considering it's not really that bad to say have 1,000 guests and have 30 hungry, 30 thirsty. That's not bad. It could be better, but it's not bad. And so, and this number will fluctuate up and down as guests are in shows and stuff like that. Obviously, the longer they're in shows for, the more these numbers will increase as guests get hungrier and thirstier. So these numbers fluctuate a bit. I find they tend to fluctuate right around these values, actually. When the shows are reaching near their end, this thirst meter can get up above 100. When it's right before a show, it can be down around 40. So yeah, not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. And these shows are incredibly profitable. If we go ahead and go in here, we can go ahead and look at show finances. You can see last month it was 772, average 182. Yeah, although attendance was a lot lower for some reason. I don't know why. Oh, that's average, duh. That's the average attendance. Last time was inflated. My bad. Still kind of odd that it's distributed that way. Kind of weird. August 18th, and there's still nothing in the current. Why was that so low? Why is that so low? Because this is a dolphin show. There's plenty of grandstands here. There should be a lot higher than 40, I would think. I would think the average 127 would be a little more realistic. Let's see about the sea lion show. It's the same thing. Last was 0 apparently. This is kind of acting weird. I'm not sure why it's acting like this. This is kind of bizarre. I mean, either way, you're seeing that this show has made 605 in profit, and this show in total has made 2,374. This one's a much older show, 13 months in operation versus 10. It's actually not that much older. I guess it's also because it's larger, so there's more guests being able to pour in. That's probably the majority of it. But yeah, you can see it's largely functional. This whole thing is pretty functional. I mean, I only have 8 angry guests. It's not much at all, especially considering I have 1,200 in total. And the rest of the zoo is very functional. If we go ahead and look at our building average profit, we only have 4 buildings that are even in debt at all. One of them being our fancy ice cream stand, which I think that's probably just because there's all sorts of extra food stalls around there. They're digging into the people that would buy it just for food. We have our crushed ice stand, which is right there. And then 2 show grandstands here by the dolphin shows. I imagine it's, yeah, these last 2. It's harder for them to get people in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, I'm thinking 12 is too much. Because I was running the same thing before where I had 12 down and the last 2 weren't full. So I'm thinking 10 is probably the max you want to go for. There's still some experimenting I'm doing on that front. I've never quite done the full math. I always knew it was around 10, but I didn't know if adding an extra couple would be that big a deal or not. I'm starting to find that it might be that's too much. So yeah, I would say probably no more than 10 grandstands. That usually works pretty well. So yeah, this is kind of it in the. This is kind of the thesis for this. This zoo here is pretty good, showing that the thesis that I'm providing here works really well. Small optimizations, given zoo, I could probably chop off 2 of these grandstands. I'm not quite sure what this finance screen's going on here. This is kind of weird. Apparently last month there was none. Maybe it's just taking that long for the marine specialist to walk it, and so it's kind of throwing off the number of shows per month. I don't know. In fact, actually, that's probably actually it, because the months do go by decently quick. Maybe they're just a little too far apart. Because it's not like they need to be a mile apart in order for this to work. You know, you don't want it to be that far. This might be just a little too far, maybe. Maybe if my dolphin show were right here, it'd be easier. But, we're not necessarily striving for perfection here. We're not trying to do micro strats here, where we're trying to micromanage everything. We're just trying to get things to be generally functional, and they are in this zoo, very largely so. I mean, we go to our profit screen here. I mean, we're making bank every month, and a lot of this is due to private donations, but still, we're getting that every month because there's so many happy guests. I mean, we have 36 benefactors, and that wouldn't happen if the zoo were failing, obviously. And that's another thing that a lot of people are having issues with, as the rest of the zoo suffers and stuff like that. It's hard to get those benefactors because there's more unhappy guests. So this is kind of a proof of concept of how shows work, and how they can work. If I go ahead and show off the sea lion show here, you can see it's the same idea. We're just doing sort of 2 of each, roughly. 2 tricks each. Two of each trick. There we go. And things work. As you can see, the guests are pretty evenly distributed. I'm not running into any real problems. Starting to kind of increase on, or actually decrease here. Sorry. So the number's decreasing again because, again, we're between shows at the moment. Doing pretty well. One more thing, I'm recording this in post because I forgot to mention this during the recording session. I want to go ahead and highlight a couple other things you can go ahead and do to further optimize this strategy a little more. That is actually keeping guests from going over toward the shows in the first place. Obviously, all the guests are going to come flooding in here whenever a show starts up, and the grandstands can't hold them all. So you actually want to limit the amount of overflow as much as possible, keeping those guests from even going here in the first place. And there's 2 main ways to go ahead and go about that. One is placing your attraction buildings further from the shows. So if you notice, I have shows on either corner of this zoo here. And my attraction buildings, such as my carousel, animal theater, dinosaur cinema, primate house, all that, are sort of in this area in between them. So that way it's further away from the shows and helping pull guests away from the shows, even as the shows are happening, because guests that are heading towards them will likely not break off. And as well as any guests that are inside of these attractions are obviously not going to be heading toward the shows immediately. And so this goes ahead, this limits the amount of guests that are heading over toward your shows. But the other main factor is actually a staff type that people don't often give enough credit, and that is the tour guides. Tour guides carry around tour groups throughout the zoo, and guests don't often break off from tour groups very easily. The only juncture at which they will, well, 2 points. One is when a tour guide has just finished their spiel over at a exhibit and start walking off. At that point, guests might break off. The other one is that if a guest becomes hungry, they might break off to go ahead and go to a restaurant. Obviously, if they're going to a restaurant, they're not going to go to the shows, so you don't have to worry about that. They're providing more economic activity to your restaurants. The other one, of course, being that they might be further away from your shows if your exhibits are away from the shows. So, for instance, if a tour guide's over here by these saltwater crocodiles and then a guest breaks off, they're going to be taking a while to get to the shows. At which point they might get hungry along the way, stop over at a snack stand here, that kind of thing. Provide more economic activity, again, without being in the show. Also, any guests that are just part of the tour group already are just going to continue being part of the tour group. So even as all these guests are flooding out into the food court there, any guests breaking off from this tour group might just wander off into one of these shops or animal houses or what have you. And so going ahead and having these tour groups around can also help siphon guests away from shows. So having a handful of tour guides can be very helpful in this area. There are other situations where tour guides can be helpful as well. And so I definitely think they're probably one of the more underrated staff types in the game for more general gameplay. Anyways, that's it for this tip. Let's go ahead and cut to the end. So yeah, that's really about all I've got for this. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, go ahead and hit the like button. And then check the links down below in the description for all my socials, including my Discord server where you can talk to me about this game or any other. Thank you all for watching. Have a great day.